24th of April, 1993. Two members of the Irish Republican Army park a truck bomb in the heart of the City of London. They call in a warning. The police frantically evacuate the area. But what they don't know is that one of these office blocks has been turned into residential. And lying on the bed, comatose after a massive night out, is a 24-year-old advertising sales executive. I didn't hear the truck bomb go off. I heard the glass. My house was about 150 meters this way. 500 tons of glass fell from the windows of the City of London that day. And I run out. I don't know what I'm doing. There's a policeman saying, get out, there might be another one. And I'm running, and the glass is still falling. And then I feel this acute pain in the back of my neck. It's the bloody hangover. It's kicking in. And I'm running past Burger King, but that's off the menu because that's been totaled. And then I realize 5 minutes away, there is a Mickey D's on Cheapside, Big Mac fries and a fat Coke, and I'm sunny side up. I'm walking out of this terrorist attack without a scratch on me. Well, it wasn't quite as simple as that. I did have some issues after that to go from a state of lying in complete relaxation, and let's face it, still drunk, to running for my life down a street. But this moment is the inciting incident, the moment where I went from my ordinary world as an advertising sales executive to committing to being a screenwriter. Because before, I'd been to a couple of courses, I'd kicked the tires of a couple of scripts, but I never really committed in the way that I then committed. I worked at the Financial Times, and I started working in my holidays on scripts. I worked at nights. I worked at the weekends, and I teamed up with a very good friend of mine from university called Matt Harvey, and we started writing together. We sold our first script. We got an agent, and for 17 years, we wrote screenplays, and the mission always was to get to Hollywood, which we did. And I counted them up. I have written 45 screenplays. 35 of them have been paid for in terms of options or revisions. 6 have been made, and not everything that I've done has been credited. But I come to you today with all of this. Come here and I think, well, what do they know? What do they need to know? What do I know that they don't know that might help them? So today, I'm going to give you a whirlwind tour of some of the things that I've picked up, which I hope will be of use to you. There are no shortcuts in screenwriting, but there are some long cuts that you don't want to take. And I can advise you tactically how to get an agent, how to handle a producer meeting, how to make yourself hireable. But the most important thing I can do, I think, is to help you with something that I wish I'd thought about years ago. And it came to me only last year from this guy, Mark Schaefer. So he writes books about personal branding, and I'm now making films for brands and helping them tell their stories. And he has a question, which I think all of us have to answer. And that question is this: what do you want to be known as a screenwriter? It's an existential question. It cuts to the heart of who we are as human beings. So imagine you're dead. It could be next week. It could be in 50 years. You're at your funeral, and you've got a little bug on it, and you can hear what they're saying about you. What are they saying? How would you like them to talk about your professional career? How would you like them to talk about your writing? So I just want everyone in here to take a minute and think about that question, because it's fundamental to you getting the right career strategy, which is the most important thing, in my opinion. So let's take 60 seconds to answer this huge question. What do you want to be known as a writer? It's a big tombstone. It's an empty space. What do you want on there? He's not the first person to bring up this question of what you want to be known as. There's another guy who did it in this movie, Dead Poets Society. Now, I'm not going to batter you around the head with Carpe Diem, We're interested in this scene.
We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race, and the human race is filled with passion. That the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. What will your verse be?
The second question that Schaeffer asks us to ask ourselves, only I can write these types of stories and bring that to the table of producers and agents. What can you do? And it's a combination of your strengths, but it's also about your personal story. And what I'm interested in is finding ways that we can, as I say, weaponize our personal story. I wanted to be known as a screenwriter of stories, espionage stories, terrorism, because that's what I understood. That was my personal story. And actually, it wasn't just that. It goes deeper than that, because my mother dodged a flying bomb in 1943, which flattened her street. And then 18 months ago, I got a call from my daughter. She's in the back of a taxi in Manchester, and she's just pumping with adrenaline and fear. And she goes, Dad, this guy blew himself up at Ariana Grande. And I heard in her voice that same mixture of fear and adrenaline, that she got away with it. So I understand what it means to get away with it. And if I'm going to pitch for a story for a war photographer, I know what that is. And I have sold a story about Don McCullin, the war photographer. I did some classes to the London Met last year. And one of my students, Abel, I was helping them pitch their stories. And he pitched me this Western. And I'm like, Abel, mate, why you're a third-year student, you're about to go out into the world. Why are you even thinking of writing a Western based if you're in London? And he said, I love Westerns, I love Bone Tomahawk. Okay, but why? What's the why? What can you bring to this Western that 10,000 Westerns haven't already done before? And he wasn't having it, but he's a good lad, Abel. And he sent me a script about 6 months later, which was in a much better space to market him, which was actually a family show, like a pilot. And we kept in touch. And he's now been hired. And I said, well, how did you do it? He said, well, I had a meeting. And the producer asked me why I wrote, and I was just honest about it. I was diagnosed as on the spectrum of autism when I was a kid, and I write because it helps me deal with my anxiety. And immediately she thought, well, I know there's a show called Pablo. It's a preschool show, and I think I can get you in the room. And he did, and only he could do what he does now on Pablo. I've been advising him to think of his unique only eye, that now we're at a time where there's a whole generation that is anxious and worried. Well, it's not just a whole generation, it's most of us. And he is an expert in anxiety. So only he can bring his personal story and his perspective, his worldview to the table. And this is the key to getting hired. Because the secret of it all is, we're all thinking we want to sell our stuff. I want to get this made, I want to get this made. That's not the gig. It's not the plan. Most jobs are working on other people's stuff. Producers don't make normally what you want to make. They make things they want to make. And you should start thinking, well, how can I help them do this? And if you've got a meeting with a showrunner or a producer, your most valuable asset is your unique world perspective, your worldview, what only you can bring to the table. I would advise all of you to write stories in the same space. This is the color chart. If up here red is thriller, and you've written a thriller, you can write a horror thriller. You might be able to go into the orange and write a sci-fi thriller, but it's shades of the same color. And you want to specialize. Don't go broad, I would suggest. Now, you may think, don't put me in a box. I can write comedy. I can write a thriller. I can do a sci-fi epic. The job here is to break in. And to break in, you have to become known for a particular skill. You know why? Because as most jobs are working on other people's stuff, if they buy a book, they think, right, who can I get to pitch for this? Oh, I know. I know this person is good at thrillers. That's how you get hired. Think of a producer's brain like Google search, a human Google search, and you want to be ranking at the top of those results. And the way you do that is by specializing and writing in shades of the same color initially. Afterwards, you can break out. You can be like Jordan Peele, who was this fantastic comic, and now he's doing Get Out and Us. Robin Williams, look at him. He was Mrs. Doubtfire, and then he did Insomnia and 1 Hour Photo. You can break out later. Be disciplined. Write in shades of the same color. This is what I suggest you need to think about. The 4 circles. Find your writing sweet spot. And I've been to panels before. You get distributors sitting on the panel, and the writer asks a question. What should I do? What should I write? Write what you know, or write what you love. Don't worry about the market. And I think this is unhelpful advice. You do need to write what you love, because you're going to spend 6 months dying at the desk trying to figure it out. So it is absolutely important that that circle of the Venn diagram is covered. If the 3 others are there and you don't love it, you will fail. But what you want to be doing is creating stories that showcase your strengths. And that comes from knowing what your strengths are. And you want to create stories that answer the question only I. If you come up with this, you'll be ahead of 90% of the rest of the writers who are queuing up trying to get through the door. And the biggest thing I would argue is make sure the stories that you choose to write are in circle 4, which is they are part of your known strategy. That these stories are advancing your position in the market so your representatives can place you, and so you can become more known for this thing that you've decided you're best at, and which only you could write. Now, there is a 5th circle, and that is the market. And this one is the hardest one to get right, because who knows what everyone wants. But what I would say is this: do not be ignorant about changes in the film and television market. Watch these 3 little clips and have a think, and I want somebody to tell me what they all have in common.
Injuries we sustain.
Thank God.
Things have gotten out of hand with our friend.
You gotta sit down, everybody says so.
It's what it is.
They're Netflix, right? That last movie, The Irishman, will have a limited release, but be in no doubt, these are made for TV movies. This guy directs TV movies now. Scorsese couldn't get the money to make The Irishman, a man who loves cinema more than life itself. It's his religion. And 50% of the people who are going to be watching The Irishman are going to be watching it on their telephones. How happy is he about that? Not happy at all. And that's why he's been lashing out at Marvel. But this is the new reality. So how many people here, I imagine a lot of you are thinking about features, right? I think you should absolutely figure out a way to get a feature made. But if at all possible, think television. I sometimes get into trouble for saying things as I see them. And one of the things I'm going to tell you, I got from a producer. My manager in LA set up this meeting, and I've been getting scripts and things, and I was thinking, like, maybe I should think about doing management or producing. And I had a meeting, and the moment I told him that, he looked at me and behaved with me in a different way. Because no longer I was a writer, I was on the producer side of the fence. And I said, well, you know, what if I found a great script, how would it work? And he said, well, the most important thing is the writer. I said, you mean the writer's got to be really, really good? He said, no. The writer's got to be on the list. This is British television, international TV. You've got to be on the list. I said, what do you mean the list? What list? There are 30 blue chip writers who are known and who are in demand, and the broadcasters and the networks would rather deal with them. So you can have a great script, and if you're not on the list, it's that much harder. So that's the bad news. You're just going to have to be better than you ever thought you were going to be. And you're going to have to make them make an exception for you. Look at the capture. The writer-director of this was not on the list. They'd done some stuff, but they got into a position where the broadcasters had to say yes, because they had a great story. Broadcasters looked at it and said, well, it's not by Jed Mercurio, but by goodness, it looks like it. Now, I'm not saying imitate other people, but know what the market's looking for. This was in Screen Daily in August 2019. I'm reading this and I'm alarmed. B+ used to be good enough in features, not in prestige television. You have to be extraordinary. And the one thing that you need, if I could give you one thing of 20 years of what I've learned, The one talent, the one skill that you must improve is your character writing. Yes, you need a whopping great big premise. Yes, it's got to work for the market, but if you want to get hired, you've got to be a fantastic character writer. Other changes in the industry, which women you absolutely will welcome, is this. For 50 years, forever, men have had it really easy. You look at something like The In-Betweeners, it's a male story with male characters and male writers. Well, that is over. And it's not just the writers. There is an unofficial quota system. Quoted in that Screen Daily, female directors are front of the queue now after years of struggling to even get a meeting. And cinema, it's never going to die. Yeah, it's going to change. Yeah, we've lost the middle budget movies. But some movies that are doing quite well are art house movies. But you've got to be award levels good. You know, you really have to be able to attract the talent, who, by the way, want to be in your movie. Because they're doing all these Marvel movies for millions, and they're bored. They've got green screen fatigue. How are they going to get an Oscar on a Marvel movie if they're block booked for 18 months? Well, they're going to work on your movie. Work out what you want to be known as. Work out what your strengths are. Work out what only you could write. And work out, ideally, it's hard sometimes, how you can lever your personal story so that when you get in a meeting with people like this, there's a reason behind you writing. So here are some strategies on how to get an agent. Firstly, the cold call. I have to admit, I've got a bit of previous in this. I, over the years, have signed with 8 agents, 3 managers, and an attorney, over here and over in the States. Having done that, there are certain things that work and certain things that don't. And I would generally say the cold query is a real long shot. My first agent signed me in the days when you used to have to write query letters. He agreed to read my script. And the first line of the script was exterior Drakensberg Valley Day. And that was his favorite place in the whole world, so I got lucky. And he sold the script 2 weeks later. But the most effective way to get an agent is to be referred by another industry insider. And this is what you need to work at. There's a right way of trying to get a referral, and there's a wrong way, and I'll get onto that. But I'd say that probably out of my 11, 12 reps, 8 of them have come from referrals of people who've read my writing and said to an agent, look, you really should sit down with this guy. The third way is to win a competition. Competitions, you might think, well, aren't they a bit of a lottery? A bun fight, like the odds are ridiculous? Well, yes and no. In World War II, they did a survey, some research, psychological research on a US World War II combat platoon. And out of a platoon of 100, 50 were ineffective because they were cowering and they didn't want to get killed. Another 40 were ineffective because they were shooting over their heads. They didn't want to kill any Germans. And only between 8 and 10 members of this platoon were effective. Well, it's just the same for screenwriting competitions. There's 10,000 entries, 9,000 are a waste of space and just pay and make money for everyone else. 1,000 are half decent, but how many of those have actually got good plots, good characters, maybe 50? So it's not a lottery ticket if you can write a great script. A couple of years ago, I put a script on the Blacklist. My agent hadn't sold it. I thought, well, let's see what the Blacklist can do. And 6 days later, I get an email from Owen Winkler's company, and they say, we want to buy it, and they bought it. I've also won something called the Tracking Board. I had a manager who didn't like a script that my co-writer and I wrote, and he was sitting on it, and he didn't go and sell it. And I thought, you know what? What if he's wrong? So I entered it into the Tracking Board competition. We got in the top 10, and we signed, and another manager came in and said, right, I want to represent you, and we switched. Like, the Tracking Board is very commercial. You know, if you want to get a manager, you want to pump it around town, that's very good for that. The Blacklist is a very wide church. The fourth way to get an agent, and this, I swear, if I could do this, I would do this, and if you can do it, you should absolutely do this. So right now, playwrights are very busy in television. One of my former agents, she would rather go to a play in Dean Street and watch a fringe play looking for clients than read through the slush pile because of their talent for character writing, which is the greatest currency in television right now. But I think that the most important thing to get an agent or a manager is to nail down your career strategy before you even get in the room, before you even contact them, so that you've got 2 scripts in the same space, and you've hit your sweet spot. And the other issue is I would strongly advise everyone here to stop chasing agents. We think that when we get an agent, that all our problems are going to go away, and it's utter bollocks. It's like the windscreen wiper effect, okay? So I've got a mate who is my sort of guru on relationships, and we were having a conversation about stuff, and he said, listen, it's the windscreen wiper effect, that if you chase someone, they'll move away from you. But if you pull away, there's a chance they may come after you. Now, I'm not sure if that's entirely right for human relationships or even ethical, but I'm telling you it's right for the film business. And the opposite of that is this. I am delighted to be here, and I'm honored to be here, Chris, but I will pass on a comment that my former agent, I fired the guy, made about the London Screenwriters Festival. This is how they see us. He said, oh, you don't know the feeling to be in a room at the London Screenwriters Festival surrounded by feral, unrepresented writers. That's how they feel. Why do they feel like that? Because of the way that we're so desperate in a short moment to have an interaction and get something from them. And this is a massive problem. So people often reach out. I have videos on YouTube. I actually have a larger following on LinkedIn where people do contact you. And I try and give people advice. I try and help them. But the people I won't help are people who say, hi, one guy had this. He goes, I quite liked your videos. I'm looking for a job in the industry, can't find it. And also I need an agent. That is not the way to network. And I'm going to embarrass Sarah Morrison here, who actually, I guess, found out about me because of my videos. She watched one of my videos, she sent me a message on LinkedIn, and we just started talking about movies and industries, and she didn't ask anything of me. What she actually did was she invited me here to meet you. So what she did is the opposite of being a feral writer. And it comes down to this. I got a mate, okay, he's got a very northern mother, okay, and she said to him, Johnny, there's two types of people in this world. Them's radiators and drains. Radiators, they give out heat. They help people, they warm people. Them drains is takers. Now, as writers, and I've been a drain, I was never feral because I wouldn't have got signed by all those agents if I'd gone in there and showed my teeth and gimme, gimme, gimme. It was a little bit more subtle than that. But I think I was selfish. And every single interaction you have with somebody in the industry, think this. How can I help them? And you may think, well, I have no power. You'd be surprised. The currency now, for instance, for me, if somebody likes my stuff on YouTube, if somebody comments, if somebody helps me, I'm much more inclined to help them. It's just human nature. So don't be a drain, be a radiator. So here's some specific strategies of how to ace your meetings with agents and producers. Okay, these are tactical things. So number one, do your recon. If you get a meeting, you need to sign up for IMBD Pro. You'll get a list of all the projects they've got in development, all the people they're working with. And before you walk in the door, you know what they're developing. It's not 100% accurate, but I'm telling you, especially go out to LA, if you can walk in and you know the answers to the question, you're already answering, hey, are you developing anything in this space? And you know they are. And you can gently give them a little nudge to start thinking about you in that space. So do your recon absolutely. And not, this is going to sound creepy, not just on the company, do it on the person. Like, you have to watch this documentary, The Great Hack, about Cambridge Analytica. If you haven't seen it, it's an absolute must-watch.
Cambridge Analytica claimed to have 5,000 data points on every American voter.
They said that they figured out whether you're a Trump or Hillary voter by looking at your 3 posts on Facebook. And they knew your sexual orientation, they knew which way you vote. It's creepy. But maybe you find out they like a particular sport. Maybe you find out that they love a particular movie. And this is what it really comes down to. You've got to be a human being as well as being a bit of a psycho. You've got to stalk them without them knowing. But equally, when you get there, the most important thing you can do is make a human connection. Like Sarah did with me. And Matt and I, we used to go to LA. We'd go for 2-3 weeks at a time. And our manager would set up 5 meetings every day. So we do 50 meetings in two weeks. And it was like, it was incredible. It was like going to the Olympics. But what happened is I would always want to get rid of the chit-chat and move to the pitching. And that was a big mistake. You don't want to do that. And in fact, once I realized that, I did, a couple of years ago, I met a British producer. For 50, 60 minutes of the meeting, we talked about Winchester, because he'd been to school there, and talking about the kind of movies we'd like. And then almost as a goodbye, I said, oh, I've got this project in the espionage space, and he bought it in the room. Because I'd established a human connection with him. And the third thing you need to do is open up their taste buds. You want to find out, sometimes it can be hard with a stranger to find out what kind of person they are. But you have one thing that you share. And that is a love of movies and television. If you find out they like espionage thrillers, by God, you're going to pitch them an espionage thriller a bit later on. And the other thing you need to find out is what is the taste of their company. Some of them will brush you off and say, well, what are you guys looking for? And they say, oh, just a good story. That's useless intelligence. You want to find out that they like espionage stories, and then you can pitch in that space. The fourth thing you've got to do is when you are invited to talk about your ideas, and they say, hey, it's very casual, by the way. Nobody says, pitch me your next idea. It doesn't work like that. It's really cash. It's like, so what are you working on? And cash, you'll say, in 25 words or less, what you're working on. And make it sound like the most natural conversation. Imagine you're in the pub with a mate, and a mate says, what was that movie about? That's the level of tone that you want to get in the pub chat. And you've got to answer the question, why are you writing this story? Why only you could write this story? And why does this story need to get made now? Fifth thing you need to do, or don't need to do, is don't show them too many pens. In my year off, I sold fountain pens. And sometimes I'd sell a ton of them in a week, and sometimes I'd sell not many at all. And I figured out what the secret was. If I got out a Schaefer, a Parker, a Mont Blanc, and a Cross, and maybe a couple of ball pens, and said, do you want a ball pen? Do you want a roller ball? I'd never make a sale. Too many choices. But if I got out a Mont Blanc and a Parker Duofold and said, which one do you want? I had a much better chance of converting. So don't show them too many pens, and remember Sinatra. This is my little thing that I picked up. It was a nasty lesson. My co-writer and I in LA, we got a producer wanted to buy one of our scripts at a company called Morgan Creek. They said they wanted to buy it. They just wanted to have a meeting with the boss. So we had a meeting with the boss, this guy called Guy McElwain. And we got talking about mafia movies. And he's a real old timer. And I said, the trick about doing remakes is choose a film that's not great in the first place, like Ocean's 11. And he says, he growls at me and he goes, I worked on that movie. I was Sinatra's publicist. The meeting ended shortly after, and they did not buy our script. The seventh thing you've got to do to ace your general meetings, your pitch meetings, is you file away the intelligence. All this information that you've got about them, what they like, what the company wants, you write it down. Because you're probably not going to sell anything in the room. But in 18 months' time, you might get a second meeting, and then you can zero in because you've got the intelligence. And I think that's the whole thing of these meetings. Don't go in there trying to sell them shit. Try and find out what they want. And if possible, be considered to help them to write their stuff. So 7 strategies to turbocharge your career. Number 1, decide what you want to be known as. Number 2, answer the question, only I. Discover your writing sweet spot, that intersection point between your talents, your personal stories, what the market wants, and what you're best at. 4, write in shades of the same color, a couple of scripts at least. Embrace the pigeonhole, and then you can jump out of it and do what you want. 5, don't chase the power. Be a radiator, not a drain. And for goodness sake, don't be a feral writer. Be a human being. And the 7th is, when you have meetings, when you're on the stage, remember strategies 1 to 6. But a lot of what I do is this, working with clients to try and find out what they should be writing. But my inspiration is Alex Ferguson. And I want to be the Alex Ferguson of career consulting and screenwriting. Because he was a half-decent player. But the reason why he was so successful is because he knew the game inside out. He'd been there. He'd played the matches. And he was able to find players more talented than himself and get them known for what they did on the world stage, including this rather odious individual who is rather talented. Now, I don't want to meet any odious individuals. I don't want to work with people who are human beings.
Hi, my name is Adam D'Alba, and I have been a working screenwriter for the past 7 years. I've worked on projects for Starz, A&E, Paramount, and others. And what was it? About 6 months ago, a screenwriter friend recommended me to Dominic. Now, initially, I was deeply skeptical about hiring a script consultant, basically paying someone for the same type of notes that I would get for free from reps, from executives and friends. But Dominic has offered me something that none of the rest have, and it works like this. I'll send him the latest draft of whatever script I'm currently working on. Dominic will email me back his notes. Now, these aren't your typical studio notes. Instead, Dominic records his notes in an audio file. It's sort of like a podcast on your script. So in that audio file, Dominic will include his comments, thoughts, questions, and critiques on the script as he's reading it in real time. So this allows me to get a window into what my reader might be thinking or feeling from moment to moment, word by word in the script. Now, I would highly recommend him to any screenwriter who's looking for a sharp, critical eye on their script.
My typical client will be somebody who is on the brink of breaking in or has the potential in the next 12 months to break in. So I don't generally work with newbies unless they're incredibly talented and they're lucky that they're already at that level. But for everyone, I'm offering you this. Send me the first 10 pages of your script and logline if you'd like to, and I can give you some feedback on that. And for $25, £20 UK, I will provide you with an audio taster of my notes. And this will do two things. Firstly, you'll get a sense whether these types of notes are valuable to you. Because what I don't want is to charge somebody £300 and then them say, you know, this guy, I totally hate him. He didn't do anything for me. Which is why this taster situation is good. It's good for you, but it's also good for me because I need to make sure that the work that I'm doing is worth it. I want to focus my time on helping people who have a shot. This is a way for you to find out whether you're in the right zone and to test drive your premise and your writing and get someone who's done 20 years of writing and all the rest of it, all the stuff that's on Scriptfella, to look at you and give you an honest appraisal of where you're at.